Hey guys, my name is Mercedes Benson and I am super excited to be hosting the second episode of Puma's Women on the Rise podcast in partnership with Note to Self. Now, in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about all things personal finance. And it's only right that I get these two amazing money savvy ladies who know how to get the bag and save the bag at the exact same time. I would like to present to our amazing virtual stage, Patricia Bright and Bola Sol. Hey ladies, how are you?
Hi.
Hello. I'm doing very well.
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, I know so much about you guys, but there might be a 1% chance that people out there don't know who you are. 1%. So for that 1%, I would love for you guys to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Patricia Bright, you can go first.
So I'm obviously a YouTuber creator. I've been blogging, I've been vlogging for quite a long time. And I'm also founder of the Break platform where we talk about, finance and just leveling up in the best way possible.
Amazing. And what about you, Bola Sol?
Hi everyone, I'm Bola Sol. I studied mathematics and finance at university. Shortly after, I started a company called Refined Currency. The slogan is the new age of women and money. And I started a sister company recently called Rich Girl Chronicles, which is all about defining your story with money.
Now, this is great. I feel like there's a lot of money in this chat right now. I'm getting rich girl vibes, I'm getting rich girl vibes. I'm getting, we're going to make that break vibes. Like, this is perfect. I think right now as well during lockdown, it's so hard for everyone when it comes to personal finance. How are you guys even handling your personal finances during lockdown? Because work is definitely much lower than it was pre-lockdown. The world is changing. The economy is changing. So how are you ladies finding it?
For me personally, I was aware that something was going to happen and there's a worldwide pandemic. So that is going to impact my bag, basically.
Right.
But I would rather see it as an opportunity to create something and provide more value. And I know it looks like, there's less money around, but I just think that people are probably spending differently. And for me, it was all about buckling down on some of my expenses because they were a little bit high. I did a bit of an online sale as well. I sold a lot of goodies recently.
You sold a lot of fine goods.
Listen,
I was seeing Gucci, Prada, Chanel. Girl.
I was reflecting on how I had spent my money in the past.
Right.
And there were things that literally hadn't been worn for like 2 years. They were just sitting on display. I was like, you know what? In this economy, someone's going to like some of these bags. So I thought, why not sell them, make a bit of cash, put it on the side for some of the other things that I'm doing. And I knew that I was able to bring some other people joy with, a Gucci handbag.
Makes sense. What about you, Bola?
I'm currently stacking like no tomorrow. So between my emergency fund and savings, I'm going ham with that. And I agree with Patricia. I'm about low cost, high life. Like I always say, like, once you get more money, or maybe when money's a little tight, make sure that you upgrade your life and not your lifestyle. And that doesn't always include spending money. It can be things like actually looking at a subscription and saying, do I still need that subscription?
Yes.
Could I cancel it? Could I put it on? They give you like a 3-month break on particular subscriptions and things like that. So I'm just basically trying to stack my money because we're all aware, I hope we're all aware by now, that we may potentially go into a recession very soon.
I 100% agree. Like, I think before quarantine, I didn't realize how much of an emotional spender I was. As in, like, when I was feeling FOMO, I would spend money. When I was feeling upset or sad, I'm spending money. And it got to the point where I looked at my bank statement, obviously when we got to lockdown, and I was just like, yo, these outgoings can't stay the same if the work is not being as consistent as it was.
Preach.
Like, literally, and because of that, I had to put myself on a ban. Amazon, I don't want to say no names, but Amazon And Patricia, I saw you did a video on it as well.
But do you know what? It also adds value. It also adds value. I think it's okay to spend as long as you spend within your means, like cut your cloth, right? And also, if you can spend in ways that are going to add value to you, then that's okay. But again, if you're an emotional spender and you're just wasting money and stuff is just sitting on the side, no, it's time to reflect. But, you know, there are ways that spending is useful to you.
I mean, I think for me as well, it's like, what I've noticed is that, yes, even though we might be spending less on like Ubers and traveling and eating out, our funds are getting redirected, and online spending has become like super, super addictive for a lot of us.
Yeah, can I quickly touch on the fact that it's not just online spending? So I actually started some healthier habits, which was jogging, right? And then every day I would jog to the shops, and I justified it because it was food. And then one day I was like, I think I'm eating too much, right? And then I was like, right. So it can be with food as well, going to the supermarket and kind of not getting into the whole panic buying thing.
But with the online spending, what I've realized is obviously our social media usage is going up. We're seeing a lot of, you know, creatives and bloggers talk about, you know, loungewear, for example, or just anything that we could be wearing or using at home. How do we curb the balance between, I guess, still being able to spend a little bit so that our mood is still quite high, or like, you know, optimistic as such, because obviously the situation is still quite dire and slightly depressing, but then being able to strategically save at the same time. So I guess it's kind of like, you know, pleasure versus, you know, investing in yourself. How do we balance those two?
I mean, I don't really believe in balance, especially if you've got bills to pay. It's not about, you know, oh, I want to have fun, but then, you know, I've got these responsibilities. I think you have to deal with your responsibilities first, and then allocate an amount that you can use for those things that make you feel a bit better, but you don't need them. I think people will feel better if they felt like they were in control of their finances rather than kind of blocking it out and hiding. And I'm obviously obsessed with budgeting. And I think if you have an awareness of what's going on in your spending, then you're going to feel a bit more confident about what you can afford to spend on or not.
I would also say as well, it's so important, and this is something I say to myself, find appreciation in what you already have. Like, there's so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want this and I want that. And then when I do a big clear out, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at my favorite blazer. I haven't worn this in like 5 years. And it's just, then I turn around and I'm like, I just bought the same blazer like 2 weeks ago. Find appreciation in what you already have. I promise you, it is probably there. It exists in you. I always say, like, whatever you're looking for, it already exists in you. Like, you don't, there's no need to like go out every single time and buy something new. Look at what you have and make sure you know the difference between your wants and needs. So for example, right now, this blue blazer, I promise you, I've wanted it before lockdown, and I only just got it a few days ago, but I had to justify it to myself. And being on, you know, Note to Self podcast with Puma was one of the reasons I said, this is a justification. I said, this is a reason. I said, now we can move.
Yeah. And I think as well that some people have developed the habit of like shopping being a way to relax. But what you need to do is kind of replace that habit with something else. So if that's exercising, if that's eating, like, oh, I don't know if you want to do that. But you can replace bad habits with habits that add more value to you in the long run. But again, I don't think people need to have guilt around spending. My next opinion is, okay, you know, you want to buy stuff, increase your income. Okay, how are you going to match that imbalance? And then it might help people get creative.
I agree. And I guess off the back of that, I would love to just know, like, what are the practical steps that are then required to actually budget on a monthly basis? Like, what do I need to be looking at when it comes to like my ingoings and my outgoings? And I guess even with your budget planner, Patricia, like, how can you separate, you know, all the ingoings and outgoings so you're making the most of not only just saving, but then spending in the right way, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So obviously, as mentioned, I have like a budget tracker that a lot of people like, and I'm ruthless when it comes to my finances because I have goals in mind. And for me, it's about you have to deal with your responsibilities. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have your rent covered, your food covered, and all your key adult responsibilities covered before everything else. And then you have an amount to play with. If you don't have an amount to play with, clearly there is something wrong and you need to up your income or you need to reduce your expenses. There's no other way about it. There's no shortcuts in this world. But then once you have that balance, it's up to you to decide what do you want to do with it. But a lot of people don't even know what that figure is. And they always wonder, at the end of the month, like, what's going on? Like, why don't I have enough? They've spent here and there rather than like automatically paying some of those main expenses first. So I think it's really important for people to have an awareness of what they have going on in their finances.
And kind of like touching on that, Bola, you mentioned the importance of having an emergency fund. So once I've been able to like budget and know what my ingoings and my outgoings are, how do I then start saving for that emergency fund? And what does that emergency fund actually look like? Because my emergency fund could be a Chanel bag, it could be, you know, some Puma trainers or something like that. So like, how do we justify what that emergency fund should look like?
Yeah, so I would definitely say an emergency fund is a backup of your necessities, right? So it's your needs, it's the things that you usually put on your budget, and it's preparing for situations that you didn't see coming. So one of the words I'm sure a lot of us have been hearing recently is unprecedented. So emergency is unprecedented funds. It is literally the same thing. The point is that, let's say, for example, I have a car and my car breaks down and now it needs repairs. Instead of me dipping into my actual savings for my medium to long-term goals, I look at my emergency fund, and that can do that. Right now, for example, I'm on furlough and I'm getting a percentage of my salary. As a result, if I needed a little more money, as I said, I would go to my emergency fund. So the whole point is you use your emergency fund when you absolutely need it. And that's why I say you need to know needs versus wants. Emergency fund is a need that everybody needs to have, because in this day and age, I don't believe in depending on one stream of income in order to live. I think it is very important that we look at multiple streams of income. And I'm so excited to talk about this because I have watched Patricia Bright's videos of multiple streams of income. It is key. It's paramount.
No, I completely agree. I feel like for the first time, you know, normally they're like a jack of all trades is a master of none, da 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 da. I feel like for the first time, being a jack of all trades is not a bad shout, because even if my DJing bag has gone down, maybe my content creator bag might be going a little bit up during this period. Or, you know, I can maybe host a webinar on Zoom and host and bring people together. Or I don't know, I might be able to give some content creation advice or some social media advice. I feel like diversifying your income right now is so important. And for a lot of people who haven't been able to do that, maybe they have a 9-to-5 and they've only stuck it at, you know, just doing that one thing, or they have a particular entrepreneurial project and they're only doing one thing. They haven't thought about, you know, what else can I do? So have you guys got any tips on, you know, what are the ways to diversify your income? How can I get the bag?
I've got so many videos on this kind of stuff.
I know.
I've actually found out about one of my friends. He's a teacher by day, and he makes an extra £4,000 per month as an Uber. Not as an Uber driver, as an Amazon delivery driver, right?
Listen.
So on top of his teacher salary, he gets £1,000 a week from Amazon, and they've even given him a free van. There is opportunity out there, even if you're not entrepreneurial. But I think that most people need to look at what their skill set is, what their understanding is, what do they know that other people might want to know. Right. You don't have to be the best, but you just need to be a really good communicator and utilize the tools that are out there to share your knowledge. People will pay you for that. Right. And, you know, there are platforms such as Teachable. I don't know if I can talk about other platforms here, but there are so many opportunities out there to actually just make additional revenue. An extra £100 here, £1,000 there can make a huge difference in people's lives.
Just to add to that, actually, it sounds so cliche, but I always love like quotes and things like this. Like, follow your passion as well. Of course, like you can mix and match it, but one of the things I found is after university, a lot of people started speaking about beauty and fashion, and I promise you, like, it is naturally not my disposition to be, I don't really think I'm a great dresser. I do okay with makeup. But one thing I was passionate about was finance. So 5 years ago, when I started a blog and I started talking about finance, everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, why is she talking about finance? Like it's not popular. Follow your passion, the money will come. I'm telling you that's the only thing I can say. Like, of course, there are some things I do and I don't enjoy it as much, but I think to myself, right, part of my passion is also making profit. It's not always on the same level, but the point is when you follow your passion, the profit will come. And sometimes in other areas, the profit will come too. But either way, when you know that you do something you love, like it will always shine through.
Definitely.
I'm always a bit of 50-50 though about follow your passion. And I completely believe that. Yeah. So I'm like, my passion is sitting down, watching Netflix and eating. If I follow that road, that is going to lead to obesity and diabetes.
I would say that your passion, I would say your passion is freedom. And as a result of freedom, you found more time. And as a result of time, you've done your passion. And as a like you have the drive. So there's a formula to it. There's a formula.
And there's a balance. I always say that, you know, passion is valuable, but also need. So if you're passionate about parrot watching, if there isn't a way to monetize that, or you need to either identify that a way of monetizing that or leaving that as a hobby, but you might be able to create opportunity as well. So there is this balance between the passion, what the opportunity is, and the amount of work you're willing to put in to making that an actual monetizable opportunity. But if you're passionate about something and if you love it, you'll be able to do it. But passion doesn't last forever, because sometimes, as much as you like, I know a lot of makeup artists who are tired of putting on makeup on people's faces and they're looking for other opportunities, even if passion, they had the passion of makeup in the beginning.
Definitely. I'd say work ethic, passion and work ethic together. As you said, Patricia, sometimes when the passion goes, if the work ethic is there, you'll find a way to make something work. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And kind of tying into that, obviously we're all in lockdown, and like some of us have been made redundant, some of us have been made furloughed, some people are, you know, struggling like never before because of this situation. When people talk about side hustles, they always make it like very glamorous. They make side hustles, you know, like you kind of have said, something that has to be passion filled and something that has to be like exciting to the eye, something I can post on Instagram. But it'll be good to kind of know and understand that like not all side hustles have to be front facing. They don't have to be glamorous. Like I love the example that you said, Patricia, whereby, you know, a guy, your friend is now an Amazon driver. That's not necessarily something that not everyone's going to start posting on their Instagram stories and be like, hey, side hustle. So, I mean, like what other side hustles can we do that might not necessarily be glamorous, but there's a need for it within this lockdown period?
So I would say, I'm going to get specific and I'm going to tell you some numbers around this as well. So one, marketing is going to go up. So people are going to want to do as much marketing as they can possibly do to build awareness around their product. So that's going to be a more competitive market. And I found, for instance, I'm working on a product right now and we were looking for voiceover artists. Do you know how much money someone who does a voiceover makes? They make over £60,000 a year. They can charge for 4 hours £1,000. If you've got a cute voice, you've got great diction, you can make some money doing something. And so and you'll never see that person's face. However, they are creating a business based on something that they do. And they also have like great recording materials. They've learned how to, I don't know, they do like diction training. And so I've worked with 4 different voiceover artists, and I could see who was the trained professional and who was just trying to get in it. And there's actually like courses where you can learn how to be a voiceover artist as well. So they also are educating themselves in how to actually build their own business in that industry. I also talked about my sister making extra money as a hand model. Okay, she's got cute fingers. They're long, slender fingers. They'll pay her £300 a day for a shoot as a hand model.
Wait. What's the criteria? Because I'm looking at my hat. What is
I am ready.
What is the criteria?
No,
the nail shops are closed, but I'm ready. I'm ready.
So she has got like extra long nail bed. She's always complimented on her hands for like her whole life. She doesn't have lizard hands like me, but she's got beautiful, long, slender fingers. And people have stopped her like, you have really nice hands. And so she's had opportunities to do things like that. So I think what it is, it's important for people to identify either what they are really specifically good at. I even did a review of a girl who's 25 I think she's making 150, 200 grand a year while having a job and selling cupcakes or was it cakes at the weekend, and then doing events at her house.
Wow.
And she makes extra money from doing that. So there's so much opportunity. It doesn't have to just be, front facing. It's just using your brain to work out what's out there.
Amazing.
Definitely.
I feel like I was waffling there. Sorry, guys. I'm very passionate about this.
No, it's so needed, honestly. Bola, what tips have you got? Because I need to make some money. I need to get out there.
Do you know what? One of the things, I would say two things. The first thing is obviously teaching. So, for example, you could even teach the English language, right? There are so many people who want to strengthen their fluency in particular languages. So if you speak any particular languages and you feel it's good enough to teach it, then do that, right? I had a friend at university and they had an English name, right? And I used to say things like, for example, oh, hi, Sam. And she was Chinese and she'd say, please, I'd use her Chinese name and I'd say, hi, Sam. And she would say, please use my English name, which is Sam, and, let's continue to have a conversation simply because I want to learn English better. And I found that very interesting, that we have no idea how many people maybe want to learn a particular language. So whether it's English, whether it's French, whether it's Yoruba, whether it's Twi, whatever it is, right? Somebody may want to learn the language that you speak fluently. So there's definitely that. And one to touch on is a personal one, but I recently found out that I have a neurodiversity. So sometimes I can make slideshows when I'm doing like Rich Girl Chronicles, and then when I'm reading it back, I'm like, some of it doesn't make sense. And I have invested in a proofreader, right? Somebody who will proofread my work for me. Trust me, if you have a message that you want to send out there, it's so important that you check it through and you make sure that you know what you're saying and in what order. So there are so many side hustles out there.
Right now, I hire so many freelancers. I mentioned this to you before, that I have a 19-year-old girl who I pay between £1,000 and £2,000 a month. She does edits, she does graphics, she does text, she does a bunch of stuff for me. She reached out to me and she has excellent work. So if you're someone who can help a business owner or help a corporation, you can offer really good service, there is opportunity out there.
I mean, some of these suggestions that you ladies have put forward are absolutely fantastic and probably hustles that I never would have considered. Like, I think the language one is amazing. Like, I would never consider teaching other people online how to speak English, just like I'm kind of learning or trying to learn how to speak other languages. I want to speak Igbo. I've been going on different websites, downloading different apps, but there's other people who are trying to do the same with our language as well, with English. So I think that's an incredible one. I mean, I think it's important that in this period we're learning to invest in ourselves, as you ladies have demonstrated. But when it comes to actually investing, this is where it gets a little bit confusing for me, a novice to personal finance. I read somewhere that putting your money in a bank is not, when we say, oh, I'm saving, we kind of get excited, like, woo, yeah, there's 10 grand, 5 grand, how many grand in our accounts. But the longer it sits there, the more it begins to, I think, depreciate based on inflation or things like that. And so I know we spoke about this earlier, Patricia, but I think this is something that a lot of people need to understand, that the only way to make your money work for you is if you invest in. So how do we invest? Like, I need beginner's guide, because this is where I'm at right now.
So I feel like I'm the layman version of this, and I think Bola's going to be able to give you a really nice description. When your money is sitting in a bank, it is depreciating, especially when interest rates are so low. At the moment, the rate of living is going up inflation is going up, but your money is remaining the exact same amount. So the £1,000 you have today is probably going to be worth like £800 in the next coming years. It's just going down. And so obviously the concept of investing is being able to make a return on the money rather than it just sitting there not doing anything. You can put it into something that ends up being profitable in the long run. Right. So Bola, you might give better numbers than I'll give, but if you get a 5% return on your £1,000, you're going to make, is it £1,050? My maths is terrible. £1,050, right? You're gonna make that return, right? Whereas again, that £1,000 sitting in the bank is making nothing and less than nothing.
True.
So investing is very valuable, but it is something that needs research. It needs time. It needs patience, and it does, take some upfront understanding as well.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I always have to say, just to clarify, is I'm not giving financial advice, just financial information. But one of the greatest of all times to invest is Warren Buffett. He is one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's invested heavily. One of the things he does say, which I very much agree with, is for passive investing, which is basically when you just get started, look into things like index funds and ETFs, which is I think it's exchange traded funds. And basically, if you think about it like this, an index fund is like, for example, you have something called the FTSE 100, which stands for the Financial Times Stock Exchange. And then it's a list of 100 companies. That's why it's called FTSE 100. So let's say, for example, you love a particular shop. I don't know, Puma. Let's say you love Puma, right? Because we love Puma over here. You love Puma, and then maybe, for example, you want to invest in other companies as well. So let's say you have all these different brands that you love, and then an index is basically all of those companies into one, and then you can invest in them. And what that does is that just helps diversify the risk. That helps diversify so that the risk is mitigated. I don't want to use too many terms because I don't want to lose people. But basically, an index fund.
No, we need this. We need this information. Don't hold back.
It's really tough because when I do my workshops, I do know that I lose people, and I feel like I have to just make sure that I rein it back in. But basically, somebody said this to me, and this is a fantastic way to put it. Every company is like a fruit, right? When you invest in an index fund or an ETF, it becomes a smoothie. You still love all of those fruits, but imagine if you put a smoothie in it and you put I don't know, water, whatever you put in a smoothie, strawberries, whatever it is, and you put them all together and you say, I like this better. So for example, I love kale, I prefer it in a smoothie, right? So it's like, kale may not go down so well on its own, but you add some strawberries in there, you add some pineapples or whatever other fruits you like, and before you know it, you absolutely love that smoothie. That is exactly what an index fund or an ETF is. There's also something called mutual funds. The whole point of that is that you get the best of both worlds. And I hope that made sense.
That literally made so much sense to me.
Now, there's always risk, and I think it's really important for people to understand there's always risk with investing, even when it comes to index funds. And for instance, Warren Buffett, he's just sold all of his airline stocks, and he's the guy who told everyone never to sell stocks, and he literally lost about, I think it was like 4 billion in airline stocks. And so that really scared me, seeing the guy who says never to sell. But anyway, that's my opinion. I'll save it for another day.
No, it's so important. So important that we speak on
I think
risk.
it was really interesting to see what's it called, Berkshire Hathaway make those sales, because I don't think they've ever done anything like that in the past. But again, this is how conversations like this can lose people. But the whole idea with the index funds is that you're diversifying your risk. You're getting every little piece of the top companies in the world. So if one goes down and another goes up, you're able to hedge the risk. You're able to balance out things going wrong, basically.
And can you guys advise or give examples of some platforms that will enable us to be able to invest in index funds if we choose to make that risk?
So I would say that what you mean is a brokerage company to partner with.
Right.
I wouldn't tell you which broker to use, as I think that would be kind of financial advice and we're not allowed to do that. But whenever you want to look at a broker, you want to look at their costs. So what are the fees associated with using their platform? What are they going to charge you to take put money in? What are they going to charge you to take money out? What are they going to charge you to buy a stock? What are they going to charge you to sell a stock? So what you want to do, I'll look at platforms that have nice and low fees over the long run. There are options such as robo-investors. You can invest yourself via brokerage fund, or you can then use a financial advisor. But a financial advisor and, mutual funds, this group over here is the more expensive group. And I'd say there are much more affordable options in this day and age.
Cool. So we just need to Google brokerages, see what comes up, see what their rates are, and then go from there.
Yeah, can I just suggest... Thank you. I just wanted to suggest that there are quite a few, as Patricia did say, and I'm not advising on any of them in particular, but there are things like Free Trade, which obviously have a great UX UI design, so it is very visually pleasing. But there's Hargreaves Lansdowne, there's Vanguard, there's Trading 212. I'm just giving you options. There's so many other brokerages out there. But one thing I'll say is make sure that you look into the details for yourself, right? Because one of the things that I have learned from teaching about personal finance is asking me what is in my portfolio does not change your portfolio. It like everybody is unique, and you need to understand that even with investing it is the same thing, and you need to make sure that you look at things like risk, as Patricia touched on earlier. But just make sure that you're doing what's best for you, because at the end of the day, unless you're investing collectively, it's all about what you do at the end of the day. And you come first.
Now, with investing, you ladies have touched on the FTSE 100, you've touched on index funds, but I don't know about you, but for me, particularly during this time, I've realized that I need to move out. And property has been on my mind over and over again. I feel like every time I'm going for my 1 hour walks, now unlimited, thank you, Boris, I have literally just been looking at houses like all the time. And I think for me, being able to create a property portfolio one day is super, super important. So my question is, how can we manipulate property buying into future investments? How can we turn that into our investment portfolio, as well as, the FTSE 100s and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so in general, investing is the concept of putting your money into something with the hope of generating a return. So you put £10 in, you get £12 out. That's what we want to do. And so property is another option to do that, but it is an expensive option. But the value around property is obviously it can provide you value now. So if you buy a house and you can live in it, then great. You've saved yourself money. You've got a roof over your head. It is valuable to you. And, it's probably more valuable in the sense of, a stock, you can't eat that stock. You can't live in that stock, but you can within a house. But, I love looking at houses, by the way, it's
my favorite sport.
It's
I
so
love
good.
it.
Right move every single day.
Yes.
But I think what you want to do is be able to find what affordable options are out there. And I think most people think that there aren't any affordable options out there. There are. I have been in the process of buying quite a few houses in London. How many have I bought in London? That sounds strong, but
we love that energy.
We love to see it.
I've done it. No, I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed in that I choose to use my cash to buy things like houses. But my sister, bought a house in London, zone 3, for £310,000, right?
Beautiful,
it's probably
beautiful.
Like recent, a 2-bedroom flat in southwest London, right by an underground station. It's still possible. We bought a place in Crystal Palace for $350,000, and it's massive. So I think working out what is available and what you can afford is really important. And I do think the auction is a great place to start. But being connected to estate agents is another way to work out what's on the market quicker than other people.
Wow. Bola, have you got any points?
I'll be honest, I don't have any properties yet. One of the things I will say though is getting a property during the recession can be good if you feel financially stable enough to do that during an economic downturn. I have to keep saying that because you have to take it as a full sentence. Please do not run with the first thing I said. It's if you have financial stability in light of an economic downturn. It can be fantastic, but you have to know what you're doing. But that's why you're locked into this podcast, so that you know your
100%.
numbers are a lot better.
And also what you want to think about is affordability. So with, you know, my sister who's bought a place for 310,000, her mortgage is £800. So that's really affordable for her.
What?
So she made the savings, you know, obviously to get the deposit, to get the money to do the house up is great, but she only pays £800 a month in a mortgage and her expenses are low. So even when I first bought my first house, which I bought, you know, it was really cheap. The guy wanted to get out and we were just coming out of a recession, but the market wasn't, you know, I was going to say swear, but it wasn't hot. It wasn't that hot. And so our mortgage was £900 between two of us. So we were really, really lucky in buying the cheap houses and getting the good mortgages. So if you can get a deposit together, in the long term, it is actually a really good option if it's something that you want to do and can maintain.
That is incredible, because my friends that I know of are literally paying between £1,200 to £1,800 to rent apartments in London. And to think that you can get mortgages that are under £1,000, that's incredible. Like,
definitely possible.
There is so much long-term, you know, benefits off the back of that. I wanted to know if there was any particular words of advice for creatives and freelancers, because I know, like, if you are in the 9 to 5, kind of saving up with a stable income feels a lot easier. Well, it feels more manageable than, let's say, if you're a freelancer or you're self-employed and your income is quite irregular. And I know, for example, you have to show 3 years worth of statements to to the bank or mortgage brokers, compared to showing, I think, like 3 months or 6 months if you're working 9 to 5. So as a creative, as a self-employed individual, are there any steps that I can take to make sure that I am ready to apply for mortgages and get my first property?
Yeah. Listen, let that tax man get his money when it's due. If you don't have your paperwork as a business owner together, you better put your head down for the next 2 years and have it together. And I made these mistakes, you know, earlier on when I wanted to purchase a house and I wasn't a working girl. It was a lot more difficult. I waited an extra 2 years. So I had 3 years of really good accounts showing steady income. You need to have your evidence of what you're going to be able to afford. And they are even more strict on people who are self-employed or freelancers, but because your money can fluctuate a lot more. But it is definitely possible. And I have a feeling that they will start changing up the rules around getting a mortgage, because the nature of working, I think, is changing. But be on top of your paperwork. This is not the time to take money on the side and not let HMRC know what they need to know and then think you're going to get a mortgage. No, not in 2020.
I can't lie. I invested in getting an accountant about 18 months ago, and that has literally changed my whole, you know, perspective on just money and personal finance, because I was slapped with a crazy bill 3-4 years ago.
Been there.
From a job that I did right at the beginning of my career, because I didn't understand what contracting was. And I remember at the time my boss was like, oh, well, you're under the threshold, so you'll be fine. No. That wasn't what it was. So they found me 3 years later and said, yeah, you see these 4 figures? You need to pay for it. So get your paperwork in order, guys. I completely agree.
Definitely. And note to self, get you a woman like Puma that can do both, right? That's really important.
Yeah.
So for example, a lot of people say to me, you know, Bola, you've been doing this for 5 years. You know, I've been a contractor, so I've been self-employed, and now I'm a permanent employee again. Thank God, in light of the times, it just about worked out, because if I was a contractor, it might not have worked out for me. But the point is, I'm both self-employed and I also have an employer, so I work for somebody else as well. It is okay to do both. I think there was, to a certain degree, I think there was a time where a lot of people were using this model of, I've now made X amount of money from my side hustle, it's time to quit my job. You have to look at your particular situation and see where it works for you. Everybody's life is set up so differently, and it's okay to do both. That's why when some people say to me, Bola, you haven't posted in 3 months, I'm like, I have a day job, I can't do it all. I'm working, and you have to look after your mental health, and you can't be running around crazy, because I find that when I'm the most disorganized is actually when my money goes missing, because it's like, oh my gosh, I have to have to grab breakfast here and lunch, and before you know it, you're like, okay, so what's actually left for me to invest back into myself?
Yeah.
I think that's so important because even with myself as well, a lot of people might think like, oh, Mercedes, you're a DJ, you're a content creator. Even with you, Patricia, you're a content creator, but you used to work in finance.
Yeah.
I've always worked in marketing, and I've only just stopped working a 9 to 5 in the past, let's say, leading up to 12 months now. So I'm fresh, but I've always worked a 9 to 5 and done the extra on the side as well. So it's possible to do both.
I wanted to add that, I worked for 5 to 6 years in a city in a grueling job for grueling banks. I was in at 7 a.m. and I'd leave at 10 o'clock at night because I worked at a consulting firm and they weren't playing and the clients weren't playing. And then at the weekends, I would do my social media, my YouTube channel. And it took me a really long time to actually leave the job because I had a cushy, good old salary, pension set aside, bonus was laid out. But I knew that I wanted to do this. But it wasn't just like I had to do a proper calculation to see if I could actually afford it. And also, did I have a backup plan? Because if I left the city to go and have a YouTube channel, who was going to re-employ me? That was a question that I would ask myself as well. So it's definitely a good idea to straddle both in the short term until you have, the security of a long-term opportunity.
Now, Bola, before the podcast, you mentioned the importance of life insurance. Now, it'd be great if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, definitely. So recently I've been talking more about life insurance because almost 2 years ago, my father passed away. And he was a lawyer, and when it came time to, he lived in Nigeria, and when it came time for the funeral, I basically had to pay quite a big sum of money, which could have contributed towards things like property, for example, towards a funeral. And that is when I understood the importance of life insurance. And I remember speaking to one person at work, and they said, and then they told me as well, they lost their father at a young age, but their mother was a stay-at-home mum, and they had, I'm the youngest of 6, and he was basically saying he's the youngest of 5. And I said, how could your mother afford to be a stay-at-home mum when your father passed away? And he said, life insurance. And that is when I understood the power of life insurance and just how important it really is.
So what does it take to do it, or what do you need to do to go about getting that?
With my new job, I got this job recently, although I've been put on furlough. One of the things that it covers is life insurance. And when my sister had her first child, she got something called critical and sickness cover. So there are different facets to life insurance, right? And it depends on your particular circumstance. But the whole point of it is that if anything happens to you, even if it's something like, I know someone, for example, who had cancer and they had life insurance, you can get different forms of payouts depending on the circumstance. So they look at things like your pre-existing medical condition, the type of employment you're in, maybe if you have any savings and investments, and they look at that and they use that to basically create a premium for you that you can pay annually or monthly. A bit like car insurance, but it's basically the protection of your life. And that's how it works.
I think
for self-employed people, then that would be essential. Yeah. And when I was buying my new house, I remember that my financial advisor was like, do you want to look into like life insurance? And I was like, no, it's all right. I don't want to think about that. But now, it's something I'd definitely consider thinking about.
You're so right. It's so important that we are thinking about our future. And I guess life insurance, especially in minority ethnic backgrounds, we don't really talk about it. I remember my mum mentioning that she had life insurance when I was about 12 or 13, and I absolutely freaked out because I just thought that it meant that something was happening. But it's not, it doesn't have to be as morbid as that once it's mentioned. It's really just about protecting your future self and your future family, right, Bola?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I wanted to touch on is I was self-employed for 4 years before I went back to permanent, and everyone was just like, oh, so are you going to look into a SIP, which is a self-invested personal pension? And I was like, oh, it's fine. When I finish being self-employed, I'm going to be a millionaire, right? And then one day I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. And then out of nowhere, I was like, I need a pension. So whether you're self-employed or permanent, you need a pension. Like, you know, Patricia Bright is someone who's an example of someone who's so successful, and she, I believe you're self-employed, and I'm sure, you know, through your investments and, you know, having a pension, you've been able to make sure that you can retire when you're ready.
I mean, my pension isn't as full as it needs to be, if I be honest with you. And I was one of those people who's like, I don't really want a pension. I'm using my money for other things. I want to be rich and famous. But you need loads of options. So you can have the stocks, you can have the shares, you can have the houses, you can have the business. But a pension is another opportunity to also protect yourself in the future. Why is anybody doing anything? Why do we work now? It's all in the idea of that later on in life we'll be able to have that good life. Well, pension is a really affordable and financially astute way of doing that. You basically get free money from the government because they know they don't want to provide for you in the future. So they actually support you by giving you tax savings on the back of your pension. So it's a super important thing to do. And there's a principle of compound interest where basically you make money on the interest. So you put money in, but it has a compound growth effect. And that also happens within your pensions. That over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, even if you're putting in £10 a week or £5 a week, that money is going to be worth a lot more in the future.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you're mentioning, you know, the usage of pensions, because I think for a lot of young people, especially millennials, even Gen Z, you know, paying off our student loan is something that we just kind of like, that's a debt that I don't need to consider. And then pensions as well, it's just kind of like, that's just something that's just going to take my money that I don't even need right now. So it's almost like the things that are like super further down the line, we tend to kind of disregard. But you're telling me that if I'm putting in money into my pension, let's say from the age of 18, it could make me six figures by the time I'm 50 or 60 based on compound interest.
1,000%, yeah.
Crazy.
And it will make you money because the government give you money back on it. So you get matching opportunities, and you get I've got this calculation. I'll send it. Will I send it to you? I don't even think I can send it to you. But like afterwards, I'll show you the workings to this. But you basically, the taxman give you money back on your pension. So it's free money.
Crazy.
One thing I also wanted to mention about pensions is I believe the pension was set up by the government in 1909. And I think it's important that everybody realizes the times and that we can no longer be reliant on even one form of pension. So pension is a form of income. So the same way we've been speaking about multiple streams of income, it goes, a pension can only be one of them, which basically means I personally think we shouldn't be relying on one form of income, which is a pension. We should be creating our own, which is why the topic of personal finance is so important. And once again, why you should be listening to this podcast.
Now, I mean, you know, so far, like my brain is literally buzzing with all the tips, the tricks, the practical advice that you guys have given and shared when it comes to personal finance. But I know a lot of us listening right now are hearing exactly what you're saying, but the guilt that we might have based on debt that we might have acquired, whether it's from our student finance loans, whether it's from, you know, really bad decisions that we made in our early 20s, mid 20s, maybe still making right now, the onset of bad credit scores. A lot of these things make investing and personal finance and accounting very daunting because we know that we've got this heavy load of debt behind us. So, I mean, when it comes to using quarantine to tackle debt, what advice could you give for us in how we can go about doing that?
Firstly, I know I shouldn't say this. I want to say, like, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. It's not your fault, but it kind of is your fault. But it's not your fault. It's nothing to like, be like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person, I'm in debt. No. Right. A lot of people are in debt. Donald Trump is in debt. People are in debt. People use debt to actually make more money in the future. I think that a lot of the reasons why people end up in debt is because they're not financially literate, they're not aware, they didn't have that education or that opportunity to know what the impact of debt was. Maybe they've come from families or backgrounds where everyone's just had debt. So you can't really blame yourself for lack of knowledge. That's the first point, right? And then what you have now is a great opportunity to learn about how to get out of it and take your time. You don't have to rush getting out of debt. Slow and steady will win the race. It's okay. You're not a bad person because you have debt, but you want to start working on it and learning about how to deal with it.
Is there such thing as good debt? Kind of touching on what Patricia said, Donald Trump has debt. So does that mean debt can be good? And
yes.
If so, in what way?
Debt can be amazing. So Patricia Bright has spoken so extensively about properties. That is a way, when people get a mortgage, right, it is basically a very long-term loan. That is a debt. But let's say you buy a house and it's, I just want to do for easy maths. Let's say you buy a house and it's 100K, and by 2030, that house is now worth 400K. Can you imagine that is basically you getting 400% return on investment? That is what it means. And of course, there are things like costs. Of course, I am using very cute numbers. For some of us who live in the UK, 100K house, depending on where you're situated, is quite cheap. To some people, it may not be. But my point is this, like, debt can be good or bad. But I think it's about where your discipline is involved with your money, where it can get shaky, because someone can even have a lot of investments and still lose their money, right? So we just have to be sure that we know what we're doing and we never ever take our eye off the ball. No one is exempt from having a bad day, right? And the same goes for your financial days. And when it comes to things like guilt, I think in particular cultures, especially being Black British, one of the things that I notice is, like, you know, money sometimes feels like such a dirty word. Nobody really wants to talk about it, right? It can feel like this taboo
as well.
Exactly,
yes,
because
like,
you know,
don't talk about money.
Exactly, it's like this patriarchal kind of thing. I don't want to get too deep into feminism, but I am so into that. Like, it's like we shouldn't talk about it, but we should be. We should all be out there earning and being the woman we know we can be, really. And when I just say when it comes to guilt, the last thing I'd say is the same way you ask for forgiveness for whatever sins you've committed in other areas of your life. Forgive yourself for your own financial sins. Literally, we all make mistakes. Like, sometimes you start work late because you just forgot and you snoozed on the alarm, and sometimes you just buy one too many outfits. It happens to all of us. Forgive yourself.
And sometimes, you know, the store card offer was so cute, there was an extra discount, you're like, oh, let me pick up that House of Fraser store card. Like, we've all done it. And I think it's just when it comes to debt, you also want to look at the APR and the cost of that debt. So I always say that in the UK, the student loan debt is actually the cheapest debt you're ever get into, because it's very, very low.
Can you define what APR means?
So it's the annual percentage rate. And it's like, what is the cost of that debt? So if the APR is 30%, that's ridiculous. So you've borrowed £1,000, you end up having to pay back £1,300, right? That's stupid. That's stupid, because it's really, really expensive. And if you compound that over 5 years, you may end up basically paying back 3 times that amount. I don't know if I'm doing my maths right. I feel like I'm kind of doing my maths right. I don't know. I'm trying to do it off the top of my head. But you end up having to pay a huge amount back. But if you think about a student loan, it's very low debt in terms of the rate, the percentage rate, and the value that you can get back from the education and the potential you have from jobs in the long run actually might make that debt more worthwhile. So I'm not like, don't get a student loan because you don't want to get into debt. No, some debt is actually valuable in the long run. But if your debt is because you wanted to buy shoes and bag, no. Let's cut that out. Let's wait till we can afford it. Unless you're buying a shoe and bag. No, this sounds really bad.
No, say it.
But to finesse a guy, look cute, and get him to give you some coin, then that's all right.
Oh my gosh, we are on the same page.
I'm down. Like, if you need that new wig and that new weave,
listen, these braids are fresh for the gram. It's still there. It's still there. Oh, it's still there. Oh, let's talk real now. It's still still there. Sometimes you got to get your hair did, you got to get a new outfit, post on Instagram, and someone pays for your dinner because it's not me.
Listen,
Listen.
I'm not mad at the hustle. Like, if it's to look cute and someone's giving you coin, that might be it. And I realize that everyone's got different blessings. Someone's blessing might be their beauty. People roll down and give them 100 bags. That's not my gift. But if it was, I would use it. And then some people also have brains and smarts, and they can use that to make money. So whatever it is,
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
I mean, touching on social media and FOMO, we mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, a lot of us are still buying from online retailers. And every day I scroll on my Instagram feed and I'm seeing tracksuits that I never knew that I needed before. I'm seeing cardigans that I didn't know I needed in 26-degree weather, but because we are at home, we must be comfortable.
Who needs a cardigan in the house though?
I don't know, but this is it.
I'm wearing a blazer right now, just for this magical moment, though. But I am very hot.
The loungewear world is booming, but on the back of that, a lot of platforms are now being created to spread the costs of clothing over periods of months. Now, I never knew that I needed to get into credit when it came to clothes and non-essential items like that. How do you ladies feel about that? Because, spreading costs over car payments or housing or, maybe like room makeovers, understandable. But getting the latest, cardigans and stuff like that, is it a necessity during quarantine? Like, what do you ladies think?
I don't know who should go first. I think we're both so passionate. I don't know where to start.
I'm passing the mic. Right.
Balance. So do you need those things? No. Should you be getting into debt for those things? No. Do people feel pressure to keep up with stuff? Yes. And so do they sometimes make decisions that aren't wise for them because of that? The answer is yes. Right. Now, I don't want to look down on anyone who might get into debt to keep up appearances, but I think it's really important to understand why you're doing it. If you need an outfit to wear to work and you don't have enough money to afford that and you want to use a payment scheme to do that, I'm all here for it. But, there are charity shop options, there's thrifting options that are affordable as well. But, I don't want to judge anyone, but don't think that these schemes are out here to help you. Understand that they are making profit off the back of you. And there might be an element of you having to exercise some discipline to ensure that you don't get finessed and have a long-term impact on your credit and just your well-being if you're buying stuff you can't afford.
Definitely. Discipline is such a strong word and it's needed, especially in quarantine. Bola, go on, hit us with it.
I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet, but the first statement is pay yourself first. I cannot say that enough. I used to do it, so please don't think I'm out here judging anyone else. I'd be like, I'm just going to pop to this shop, pop to that shop. What payday? Before the money has landed in my account at 12, at 12:01, I used to be on the websites, on the shopping sites. So I'm not here to preach to you as if to say I'm better. It took time, it took discipline. But one day I said to myself, hey, where's my emergency fund? Where are my savings? Where are my long-term goals? Because after these shops come and go, guess who's still going to be here? Me. Woo. And you need to make sure that you are on point. And the second thing to ask yourself, and if you are self-employed and you have maybe your own limited company or you're a sole trader, is it tax deductible? Because if it is tax deductible, deductible, then let's do this. Car payments, if you do it in particular ways, it is tax deductible. If you have an office in your home, right, and you work from there sometimes, it is tax deductible. Hello? You got a phone, you make business calls, tax deductible. This is why you need to know your finances, know what's going on. And
agreed.
Yeah.
So I guess with quarantine, when it comes to personal finance, it's about really being able to be disciplined with our finances, knowing what's coming in, monitoring what's going out. I mean, for you ladies, what have been some exciting new ideas and opportunities that you've been able to discover when it comes to your own personal finance, platforms and opportunities? What have you been able to create for yourself? during this period?
So I think I just wanted to touch on like money mindset. And I think even with quarantine, we need to look at our mindset. Either we're going to see this moment as a time to feel down and out and scared, or a time to feel like, you know what, this might be a bit of an opportunity to allow me to tackle something I've needed to tackle. And, you know, this is all about paradigm shifts. I read a book, it's called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's a really important book. And it talks about the way your mindset can just flip in an instant. And rather than looking at now as like, you know, it's bad. It's like, you know what can I learn? What can I take? How can I use this? And for me personally, I had to like look at some demons in the eye. I saw a lot of my income go down in other places. And when I saw certain contracts pulling out, people being like, oh, we're not doing this deal, or this deal was on hold. I was like, oh, I got salaries to pay. I got kids to look after and mortgages. But then it actually made me put my time into other opportunities. And although they didn't make the exact same amount I would make on deals, I was shocked to see that they've actually turned over a really good profit. And I didn't expect that. But now it kind of made me invest in, you know what, I'm going to put some more ideas into play and see what happens. So right now I'm launching a financial fitness course. Yes, we're about to get into it. Amazing. Over 4 weeks. And I know that one, I can provide value, but I'm willing and ready to invest in my ideas and see what happens more than I probably would have done before now, because I would have been scared or even too comfortable.
I would definitely say during this quarantine period, one of the main things I have learned is you are not alone, right? You don't have to do this alone. No one is an island, and you shouldn't treat yourself that way. And I started Rich Girl Chronicles, which is a accountability group for women. And the reason it's called Rich Girl Chronicles is because you get to define your own story with money. What somebody else wants. So for example, I'm not going to lie, I want me a 6-bedroom house no matter how many kids I have, right? Let me just let you know. But at the end of the day, if I have a friend who says, do you know what, I'm fine with a 1-bedroom apartment, and it has all the things I need, that's fine. We can be rich girls together. That is the whole point of it. But the point is you get to come in and you get to define your own story with money.
Agreed. And I think it's so important as well. Like you said, it's about shifting our mindset when it comes to money. Money is not the enemy, you know, and I think a lot of us make it the enemy. A lot of us make it, you know, very negative. And like you said, it could be based on just how we grew up seeing money, how we grew up seeing debt. But if we kind of flip our mindset around, we can actually attract more money, more wealth, and just more positivity. So ladies, Patricia, Bola, I knew that you two would be perfect to be on this episode. And you've proven just that, because listen, the tips and the tricks that you've given us today, like
we are going to be rich.
Amen, hallelujah. Yes.
We're going to be rich. We're going to get the Chanel bag. We're going to get the house in Crystal Palace. We're going to get the flat over in Highgate.
We're going to take it back to Africa too.
We're going to, you know, like global mindset. Like global. I've loved everything that you've given to us in terms of just advice. I mean, if we wanted to find out more, because, you know, you two are just amazing powerhouses, how can we reach you? How can we find you?
So, you know, I'm Patricia Bright, so you can just Google me or check me out on Instagram. But you can follow more about my financial journey. And also I'm building a community of amazing women who are into this over at the Break platform, social. I think that's what it's called.
P.S. I absolutely love the Break platform. I'm just like there. I literally sit there sometimes and I'm like, yes, with my wine, ready to wind down and find out.
We need contributors.
Yes, we will. Let's go. I'm ready.
I'm
ready, definitely. You can find me at Bola_Sol, so it's BOLA_SOL, and Rich Girl Chronicles is on Instagram.
So guys, we have come to the end of this podcast episode, and honestly, I hope you are so happy with all the tea and advice that these two ladies have given. If you want to join in on the conversation, make sure you are following the Note to Self and Puma, and use the hashtag Puma Women on the Rise, which is Puma WOTR. If you're not following myself, make sure you're following me at Mercedes F. Benson. I've currently been doing the £0 May challenge. I'm going to see if I can do the £0 June challenge, aka not spend any money on non-essentials. But you're going to have to follow me on Instagram to see how far I'm doing. But yeah, like I said, if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure you give us a tweet, give us a mention on socials, and stay tuned for the next one. Peace, guys.